I'm Jim,
And I'm Garrett.
and this is Jim
Jim
and Garrett at the movies.
I think we
Welcome,
nailed it that time.
everybody. What's that?
I think we nailed it that time.
Yeah, we did okay. I still think there's like a delay because of the 2,000 miles. We were that off if we didn't nail it. So yes, our theme song is fantastic as always. Okay, welcome today to Jim and Garrett at the movies. We will be talking about the new release Bad Times at the El Royale, and we're pairing it with our movie club selection Go 1999's Go. Spoiler alert, I actually think the same thing about Go now that I did in 1999, which is really weird. Also, we're discussing our news item, movie subscription services. Are they catching on? Do they know things? What do they know? Let's find out. So we'll talk about movie subscription services and the possible death of MoviePass as our new segment. Let's sort of dive right in. We'll talk about this Bad Times at the El Royale film. So this is written and directed by Drew Goddard. It stars a host of incredible actors: Jeff Bridges, Dakota Johnson, Chris Hemsworth, John Hamm, Nick Offerman, Shea Winningham, and Cynthia Erivo, I think, who gives the finest performance in the entire film. It's a multi-plot film structured around a particular location, the El Royale Hotel, a sort of out-of-the-way rundown hotel with a dark past, so to speak. And one night, these disparate characters meet in this hotel and hijinks ensue. Each have their own clever backstory and violent explosions occur. I won't spoil the end. All of our review segments are non-spoilers. So I will, at this point, sort of turn it over to you, Garrett. What did you think about this movie before I give my opinion?
I thought it was a bit of a mixed bag. I'm getting a bit of an echo. Maybe you want to mute. It was a fantastic setup. Excellent acting, excellent cinematography, great tone, great sense of style. I think that Drew Goddard is really solidifying his sort of directorial sensibility between this and his previous feature film, The Cabin in the Woods, and of course his work on Daredevil. I'm really happy to see him come into his own, and a lot worked getting this film set up, but like a lot of films of its ilk, I feel it kind of fell apart in the third act. It wasn't really able to deliver on the promise of the mystery that was at the heart of the film for the first and second act. I wanted there to be more. I wanted it to come through and deliver with something a little bit more revelatory, a little bit more jaw-dropping, and instead it was just, oh, okay, well, a couple of different plot lines that sort of pull together and don't really have a whole lot to do with each other, and then resolve just in time or maybe a little over time. So it was a bit of a disappointment walking out.
I think I couldn't have said it better myself. That is almost. I hate it when we agree like this because you literally just said almost everything that I want to say about this movie. When these films work, they work because everything sort of comes together with synchronicity and thematically. The characters are the intersections of the different plots are incredibly clever. There was nothing clever about this. And what was most disappointing was the characters and the character development. This is a 2-hour and 21-minute film, and I felt like most of that runtime is devoted to quote unquote character development. And by the end of this, I really couldn't give a shit about any of the characters with the exception of Cynthia Erivo's character, Darlene Sweet. I think she was the one high point of this film for me, and everything else, it seemed like the characters were just spinning their wheels, telling backstory, but then that backstory didn't really have any thematic or thematic or character resolutions that kept me invested in them. One of the things that I found interesting about this is that I cared about the characters in another multi-plot film, Pulp Fiction, because I knew those characters' values and I could identify with those characters' values. In this, it's a lot of characterization rather than actual character development, like getting to know who these people are as people. And I think Cynthia Erivo's character is the only one that I really had an emotional connection with by the end of it. I think they're doing some clever things with some backstory to particularly Dakota Johnson, Emily and Rose. They play her and her sister are there's some interesting things going on there, but those things are never really explored, and they didn't really work for me overall. Surprise, Chris Hemsworth is the best Chris Hemsworth, and yet still it didn't really work for me. Yeah, I think that there's something about the way faith and spirituality is being treated in this film that is the sort of thematic orbit of this film, but it's not cohesive in any way. So overall it didn't really work for me. Do you want to jump in on any of those things?
Yeah, I think that because there is some disagreement there. I mean, first off, the agreement. I agree that Cynthia and Erivo, is that
Erivo is, I
yeah,
think that's the correct
I
pronunciation.
think
Yeah, I looked it up and saw it a couple different ways. So.
yeah, you are right that her character definitely was sort of the emotional heart of the film. Her performance, both acting and singing, she's a character as a singer, and she has an amazing voice and sings several times in the film. That is, as characters go, she is definitely the heart of it. But the fact that I didn't really resonate too much with the characters, that wasn't really a disappointment for me. I didn't see this as a character piece. I saw it as a mystery, and it set the stage very well for the mystery, but again, the resolution just wasn't all that interesting. You mentioned Chris Hemsworth. Again, I thought he delivered a fine performance. It's an interesting sort of character that he's bringing into the mix, but at the same time, it really feels like he's kind of an appendage. I mean, he's absolutely crucial to the third act, and he has absolutely virtually no presence at all in the first two acts, and nothing really to do with anything else that was going on in the film. It sort of feels like he was brought in to sort of just amp up the drama at the end. And that's it would have been more interesting if somehow he had been connected to the plot in a more interesting way, rather than just sort of being brought in as a to mop things up, as it were.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I didn't see it as a mystery. It didn't work for me as a mystery. But I agree that incorporating Chris Hemsworth's character a little bit earlier would have been the best. Um, would have been I think this film is like one revision away from actual brilliance. I think it's let me draw that back a little bit. I think this film is one revision away from being the film that I think it wants to be. I think it wants to be a modern day Pulp Fiction, and it falls short of that. And so it actually, yeah. I mean, overall, I think I gave it 2.5 stars. Maybe I was being kind. 2 stars was my Twitter review, I think. Yeah, I gave it 2.5 stars. I think that's appropriate. It's just short of a recommend for me. Although that said, I think that there are some people out there who might be able to find things worth latching onto and worth liking about this film. So it's just short of a full recommend. But for those people who really like multi-plot films, like Pulp Fiction, Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead, Go, which we'll talk about in a little bit, I might enjoy this one, but I would temper one's expectations.
So, a couple of thoughts on that before we move on. I think there's only two reasons why this Pulp Fiction might be brought up in the context of this film. One, because it is sort of multi-plot. The timeline jumps around a little bit between the different characters. But unlike Pulp Fiction, it is almost entirely set in a single location. It very clearly isn't trying to do this sort of Tarantino-esque dialogue where everything's sort of sharp and well cut. The pace is very, very different from a Tarantino film. So I don't see this film's trying to be Pulp Fiction or anything like Pulp Fiction. Just a couple of glancing similarities. And then the other one, of course, is Bad Times at the El Royale with cheese. That's I think that's frankly why your mind goes to Pulp Fiction, quite frankly.
Oh, that's funny.
And while we're on it, again, I'm noticing that I have misnamed the film in our title here. I'll correct it later, but currently it's reading Bad Times at El Royale. The proper name is Bad Times at the El Royale. And I made that mistake because that's a stupid name. El means the in Spanish. That means Bad Times at the Royal. That's just a mistake right there.
Yep. I think in our tease 2 weeks ago for this film, I called it Bad Times at the El Royale, and then I corrected myself to Bad Times at El Royale, and unfortunately, I was wrong in correcting myself. Yeah, it's a weird title. Damn, I'm so disappointed that this film is not better.
Yeah, it potential. It really did.
Yeah.
But still, I like Drew Goddard's work. I'm looking forward to what he does next. I think the technical merits of the film are very solid. Just like most movies, I feel the weakness was in the script. Not most of the script, just the final act.
Yeah, how would you? I hate to throw you on the spot like this, but this is what I'm going to do. How would you fix it?
Well, again, the opening scene, which again I'm not going to spoil, but the opening scene really grabbed me. It made me go, okay, what's happening here? Clearly, it's an important setup, and it unfolds as if that setup scene is going to be really, really important to the film overall. And it just kind of wasn't. It was important to two of the characters, but two characters out of over a half dozen. It doesn't really end up being all that central. And then once you figure out what was going on, it's literally the most obvious thing you could think of. So the MacGuffin from that opening, are going to keep the opening scene as it is, but make something more interesting for that MacGuffin, something that ties maybe not every single one of the characters to the location, but at least most of the characters to that location. That is something that I think would make it a more cohesive film. Something to do with Chris Hemsworth's character. Again, some reason for him to be in the film other than just he's brought in to make shit more exciting in the final act, like a Hemsworth ex machina, if you will.
Obviously kind of ex machina.
That's a rough sketch, of course. I can't say more without actually getting into spoilers, but those would be my brief notes.
I think that's a good idea. I would also, it goes to a well too often. It's a good well to go to, but it's ironic song versus ironic song matched with visuals. So there's an upbeat Motown song playing while something bad is happening or something along those lines, and it goes to that well like 5 times during the film.
Yeah,
and I would have done it like once or twice.
It's interesting. We should compare and contrast the soundtracks between this and Go later on. But I will say this: I really like the soundtrack. I'm not much of a Motown guy, but I really felt that the soundtrack was both appropriate for the overall tone and setting of the film, and also just some damn good songs. Not ones that I'm traditionally familiar with, but I rather enjoyed hearing.
Yeah, me too. I liked that, and I liked Cynthia Erivo's performance of those songs. There was some minor talk about an Oscar campaign for her. I wouldn't be too sad about that if that ended up happening for Best Supporting Actress. It'd be nice. Okay, so star rating, Garrett.
Yeah, 2.5. I share your ideas. Again, I want it to be so much better. It had a lot of potential. But that collapse in the third act just really hurt it. So 2.5.
Okay. So we are both at 2.5. All right, let's move on to our movie club entry. Let's move on to Go, Doug Liman's 1999 film Go. This is also a multi-plot film. The first plot was with Sarah Polley. Second plot is with Taye Diggs, and I am missing the other. I think it's Desmond Askew Simon. Yes, 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 yes. Second plot is with him, and then the third plot is with Jay Moore and Scott Wolf, Adam and Zach. The first plot, Sarah Polley is supposed to sell some ecstasy at a party, and she has to flush it down the toilet, loses the ecstasy, and ends up selling aspirin instead. Desmond Askew's character and Taye Diggs' character get involved in some hijinks in Las Vegas because it's a Doug Liman film and you have to go to Vegas. It's in his contract. And Scott Wolf and Jay Moore believe that they accidentally they accidentally kill Sarah Polley's character, in addition to some other hijinks and running around with an FBI agent who is trying to set up these by William Fichtner, an FBI agent played by William Fichtner, who's trying to set up a drug sting. So I said that I felt the same about this film now as I felt about it when I saw it in 1999, and that it boils down to a 3-star rating. I'll talk a little bit about it after I throw it over to you, Garrett, and ask you what you thought of this movie before I talk about my feelings.
I remember seeing this film in 1999 very well because I got in a car accident just a couple of hours before I went to go see it. I was rattled. I was upset. A close friend who is now my wife was consoling me. She said, "Let's go to the movies." We went to the movies. And so, because post-trauma, hormones flushing through my brain, I remembered the film very, very well, even though it's been almost 20 years. And in some ways, I thought some similar things. But what really struck me is, God damn, this film is 90s. I mean, this film is just so 90s. Everything, haircuts, the music, the clothes. I mean, it was just there. When I was in college when this came out, I didn't sort of notice it. I didn't think of it as a sign of the times. It was just the way things were. And all of those sort of, telltale signs that this is the 90s, I've forgotten about. And now looking back on it, it's like, holy crap, we did dress like that. And we listened to that music and we had that hair. And, it's not a period piece. Obviously, it was made in the 90s and it was set in the 90s, unlike Bad Times at the El Royale.
But it's 90s as fuck.
But yeah, it felt very, very of its time, and that was what the major thing that struck me. Some other complaints too, which I'll talk about later, but which I didn't notice the first time around, but did weigh a little more heavily on me now. But overall, I was pleased to revisit the film.
Cool. I thought so. I walked out of this film in 1999, and I said, "Wow, that's an exceptionally well done film promoting a philosophy that I despise." That it's a remarkably it's perfect at promoting a philosophy that I don't like, and that is, I think, every aspect of this film is about hedonism. It's about pleasure-seeking behavior. The characters experience no consequences for their actions aside from the most obvious. And even then, by the end of the film, they're fine. Everybody's fine. And the moment that really encapsulates this for me is, I think, one of the last lines of the film is, did you get enough money for your rent? Yes. With $20 to spare, maybe I'll start a savings account. And that line is sort of played off as a laugh. Yet the one thing that these fucking characters need is a savings account. Like this is in the moment behavior, and it's promoting that kind of lifestyle. And it's doing it really well. The problem is that hedonism as a way to live your life is not it's a fairly bankrupt way to negotiate the planet. And as a result of that, I found myself I know that the film is not condemning these characters. It doesn't seem to be condemning these characters at all. In fact, it's celebrating many of them, even though they are getting themselves in worlds of trouble. But it's not condemning their behavior. It's not condemning what they stand for. It's in fact promoting it, and that's something that I really couldn't get on board with.
That's interesting because I mean, hedonism's never really been my draw. Never. I mean, I went to one rave in the '90s and I didn't particularly enjoy it. I've been to Vegas many times, but never done Vegas the way it is in the movies. Yeah, I don't share the philosophy either. But interestingly, it didn't bother me. And again, in spite of the fact I'm a professional ethicist, I didn't really have any ethical objections to most of the behavior. Obviously, some particular choices in the film are wrong for a variety of reasons, but again, that's sort of the obvious ones. They're not, that's not sort of the theme or the philosophical reflection that the film is going for. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would say I saw the film as promoting hedonism per se. I mean, it compared. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily want to compare it with a film like Trainspotting, which does a good job of both sort of showing the upsides to hedonism and also the problems to hedonism. There's less of a balance in this film than there is in that one. But at the same time, I don't think. I mean, I can only speak for myself here, but I did not feel at all compelled to follow in any of these characters' footsteps or to emulate their decisions or to live their lives. So it didn't feel to me like I was being sold on the philosophy of hedonism.
Sure, and let me be clear, like, it's not, I don't necessarily think that, like, I'm not saying that the film is, I'm not saying that I want to follow in these characters' footsteps, or the film wants me to follow in these characters' footsteps. What I'm saying, and also in a film, it's okay that a character makes bad decisions. In fact, it's many films rely upon characters making bad decisions. It's okay that characters in film are garbage people. What I have a difficulty attaching myself to is characters who make completely pleasure-seeking behavior, and then the portrayal of that pleasure-seeking behavior is, don't worry, everything will be fine by the end. You'll spend a night sleeping in garbage, but you'll get up the next morning saying, let's do this again New Year's. You'll spend a night running around town being pursued by drug dealers and whatnot, but don't worry, you'll be at that New Year's party too. That there aren't consequences for these actions portrayed in the film, and that's where the film loses me slightly. It loses me on a philosophical basis. It doesn't lose me in terms of the film's drama and the way the film is portrayed. Once again, I think it's a fantastically well-made film. The problem is it's promoting a philosophy that I can't agree with.
So now I'm curious, would you make the same criticism of a film, which I believe you said you liked before, The Rules of Attraction, Roger Avary film? I think, if I recall, you said that you rather enjoyed that film, but it seems to me to promote very much the same kind of philosophy.
Yeah, actually, I think Rules of Attraction is a fascinating film to revisit. I think there's less. I think there's more condemnation of those characters in that film, and in fact, in all of Bret Easton Ellis's work. Bret Easton Ellis portrays these characters in some stark honesty, and the characters in Rules of Attraction, I don't think even like themselves. I think the characters here really like themselves. I think they're happy with the way their lives are proceeding, despite the fact that there are some challenges that they face.
I think Sarah Pauli's character definitely is not happy with the way her life is proceeding. She is constantly under pressure the whole film. She's got to pay her rent. She feels like she's behind the eight ball. She's in trouble with the law. She's in trouble with drug dealers. She seems very unhappy to me.
Then she should start a savings account. She really should take her own advice at the end of that movie and start fucking savings.
I mean, I don't mean to accuse you of classism there, but it's pretty clear her character is living paycheck to paycheck. Starting a savings account is not a viable choice for her.
I understand. I understand. I'm saying that not as an actual practical piece of advice for the character, but rather that this last line of the film is played off as a laugh. It's played off with irony. And
because
I don't
she
think
knows she can't start a savings account. It's not, I don't think it's that she doesn't think it would be a good idea. I think it's she realizes that she's going to be back in this exact same situation a month from now. And so because she's in such dire straits, the idea of even trying to save for the future is not a viable choice.
And that's a fair counter argument. I mean, to be fair to the movie and to be fair to the character, yes, that's a fair counter argument. But I think of hedonism as a um, philosophical justification for the old hashtag YOLO, the hashtag you only live once, so why not just to steal a line from the 50s, live fast and die young and leave a good-looking corpse. That's kind of my impression of hedonism as sort of a philosophical justification for that behavior. That behavior denies the idea of making plans for the future, denies the efficacy of making plans for the future, denies the rationality that it would take to put one's life into a future focused order. And that's one thing that none of these characters think to do. Now, I don't think it's classist to say that that type of outlook toward the world would benefit these characters and the struggles that we see them going through. And I want to also bring up a quote from this film. This is J.E. Freeman's character, Victor Sr. This is one of the only older characters not of the generation that's being portrayed in the film. He says, "You know what wakes me up in the middle of the night covered in cold sweat? Knowing that you aren't any worse than anyone else in your whole screwed up generation." This is talking to, I believe, his son. "In the old days, you know how you got to the top? Huh? By being better than the guy ahead of you. How do you people get to the top? By being so fucking incompetent that the guy ahead of you can't do his job, so he falls on his ass, and congratulations, you are now on top. And now the top is down here, it used to be up here, and you don't even know the fucking difference." I think that that's one character in this film who's having a sort of meta criticism of the philosophy that's being promoted by the film, which proves that the film has some sort of idea about itself. But that character is a vicious, awful mobster who's kind of thrown to the wayside by the third act of the film. And so that's where I'm.
Their hair and their music, and they're always on my damn lawn.
Well, I was 19 when I thought this. Okay, so what's funny is now I'm 38, and I'm like, these damn kids with their long hair and loud music. And then when I was 19, I was thinking, damn, these kids with their long hair and loud music. So yeah, it's sort of interesting that I've aged 20 years and the film, my reaction to the film is exactly the same.
Yeah, it's interesting when you see that happen.
Yeah.
So a couple of other quick things. First off, great cast. I think there's lots of actors here, which I still like to this day. Timothy Olyphant. Actually, I had forgotten it was him in that role, and I like him as an actor. It was interesting to see him take on that part. William Fichtner, is that how it's pronounced? Fichtner? Yeah, that's he's an actor who I've always enjoyed, and I thought he was great. I didn't realize I'm looking at IMDb now that apparently Melissa McCarthy actually has a cameo in the film. I didn't even recognize her. So that's an
funniest Melissa McCarthy performance ever. She's fantastic in that little brief moment where she meets Jay Moore and Scott Wolf's characters. Yeah.
But some criticisms which I didn't notice, didn't appreciate at the first time, but now that I felt like a lot of the beats in the film were very much rushed. So case in point, Simon's character, he's in Vegas. He has sex with two women, accidentally sets a fire, runs downstairs. There has to get out because he doesn't want to get busted. he's with Tay Diggs. They happen to get thrown the keys to a sports car, so they decide to take off and steal a sports car, and they go to the strip club, and they get in trouble at the strip club. It just feels like, several parts in the film, it felt like it was just forcing the plot along. There wasn't a sort of a logical reason for them to go from one scene to the next scene, other than we want to move the plot forward. The film felt like it had a pace. Again, this film is much more of a Tarantino-esque film. I mean, obviously, it's a little more lighthearted than Tarantino's usual work. But at the same time, this is a film that definitely would not exist were it not for Pulp Fiction. That kind of sort of fast-paced, frenetic, again, it's right there in the title, go, is understandable. But I felt that at various points, they lacked the necessary connective tissue to move the plot forward organically. So they just threw the characters and told them to run with it.
Well, I agree with you. I would say that the thing that motivates the Simon to go from the having sex with two women and setting the hotel on fire to the strip club is that he is motivated by the next pleasure-seeking behavior. So it sort of fits with my kind of philosophical criticism of the film. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right overall. You wanted to mention the music as well?
Yeah. It's interesting because, I mean, again, in contrast with El Royale, again, I did not grow up with Motown. Motown is not my genre, but I really like the music. Soundtrack for this film, even though this was my generation, this is when I was most into music. They seem to choose almost all artists and songs that I despise. The only song on the whole soundtrack I liked was the Massive Attack song, which I think they used very well. But other than that, it was, every time music came on, it's like, oh, fucking hell, God. If one of my students today watched this movie and thought, oh, that's what 90s music sound like, God, 90s music sucked. And that would really make me sad, because there was so much good music in the 90s. It's just none of it made it into this film.
What would you have thrown in some Nirvana just for good measure?
No, because Nirvana really didn't really fit. I mean, like you say, this is a film about hedonism, and Nirvana, in spite of the name, which is sort of somewhat ironic, is not feel-good, happy party, ravey music. No Doubt fits that tone. Yeah. So no, I don't know. I wouldn't want to have to go back and redo the soundtrack, because you're either going to pick. I would either pick songs that would be inappropriate, or I would pick songs that might fit the tone, but then would make sort of cheapen the songs for precisely the reasons you're talking about, because that ends up being just about sort of hedonism, rather than what I loved about the 90s music, which was sort of like, really getting back in touch with authenticity and feelings, and hence Nirvana.
Right. So what would you give it out of 5?
Yeah, I think again, I'm going to agree with you. 3 out of 5. I think
3 out of 5.
Solid enjoyment, good film. Not without its weaknesses, but very much of its period. You can see Doug Liman's burgeoning directorial skills on display here. There's blemishes, but nothing that ruins the overall experience.
I am right alongside with you, and although I sort of detailed my ambivalence about this film, I think it's incredibly well done, but also detailing things that, promoting ideas that I'm not particularly fond of. So, all right, let's move on to something I am absolutely particularly fond of, and that is movie subscription plans. Now, this comes on the heels of new news out of the Movie Pass ongoing drama. Garrett, if I'm correct, you are a Movie Pass subscriber. Is that correct?
Or as of an hour ago, not anymore. I just canceled. I know you signed on early on, and you managed to get your money's worth out of it. I signed on, and perhaps even worse, talked my wife into signing on literally right before the whole thing shit the bed. It was a pain in the ass. It was frustrating. The final straw was that the e-ticket theater near our place, which worked for a couple of weeks, just was like removed from the list and reduced to a regular theater. So it was like, okay, fuck this, we're done now. So yeah, I would have loved it for Movie Pass to work. I understand, economically speaking, why it was a real challenge. I do hope someone figures out a model that will work. I certainly can't proclaim to have the magic insight for how that would happen, but I agree with you that if it can work, if someone can get this get a model that balances sort of the financial end as well as the user experience end well, I'll happily sign up again.
So let me go back a little bit and talk about MoviePass as a service for those who might actually not be aware. MoviePass in the summer of 2017 reduced its rate. It was like at $50. It reduced it to $10 per month, and it was an app that you get on your phone that you could log into a film and you could see as many movies as you wanted, as long as you only saw one per day. You could see multiple movies. You could see the same movie multiple times. You could see multiple different movies as long as it was one movie per day for $10 a month. People like me, people like yourself, who go see movies all the time, ran to this service in droves, and we for quite a long time, MoviePass was bleeding money. But anytime you talk to the CEO of MoviePass, Mitch Lowe, he would say, as long as we get more subscribers, we'll end up being solvent. And he spun this for as long as he possibly could until Mission Impossible Fallout came, and that's when they had to start drastically reducing their plans. They originally said that it was because of technical difficulties, that when Mission Impossible Fallout came about, their service suddenly shit the bed. They later admitted it was because they were starting to become insolvent, and they didn't have enough money to pay their bills. Subsequent to that, new MoviePass news is that the New York's Attorney General has launched a probe into MoviePass and its parent company, Helios and Matheson. This probe suggests that there's a possibility that MoviePass and Helios and Matheson misled stockholders about the solvency of MoviePass. That investigation is ongoing. And Helios and Matheson Analytics, the parent company of MoviePass, has decided to siphon MoviePass out into its separate company. This spinoff requires the approval. This is per Deadline Hollywood. Quote, the spinoff requires the approval of the SEC, the state of Delaware, and NASDAQ. End quote. Basically, the goal is, once MoviePass sort of totally dies, they want to put that debt over into a separate company so it doesn't touch Helios and Matheson. Whether or not that actually works is up to their various creditors and stockholders. Helios and Matheson Analytics is a data mining company. It's a data company. It specializes in prediction models and that kind of thing. So it was basically buying MoviePass it basically had MoviePass for the data that it was then going to sell to studios, so that studios would then be able to predict which of their releases might be hits, and what projected box office might be as a result of a movie, and as a result of some of the data that Helios and Matheson would then sell to them. Whether or not that is working is behind the scenes. So all of this is sort of spelling a sad song for MoviePass and their subscribers, of which as I said in our pre-show notes, cancel, get off the boat. Once they went down to a three movie per month, I was off the boat, and apparently you are as well, Garrett. Basically because of location availability. Do you want to jump in with anything real quick before I go on to subscription plans writ large?
No, I think I hit the main point, but I will repeat again really briefly, that if someone can crack this, the model, it's going to be $1 billion idea if they can make it work right. And so someone figure it out, and until they do, I think. Well, actually, no. What I'll say is this: is I think the big enemy really is probably torrenting. If you can figure
Right.
out a way to get people to subscribe to films, they'll be paying for the films rather than illegally downloading them. That's something that I think Netflix showed people are willing to do if you can provide for them the content that they want at a reasonable price.
Well, everything you're talking about is backed up by data obtained by the Hollywood Reporter and a morning consult. So the Hollywood Reporter and Morning Consult did a national tracking poll where they basically asked a group of people about these subscription services, and they talked about, well, one of the questions was, how often do you stream TV shows? And 50% of the respondents said every day. So you're right when you talk, and several times per week, 24%. It's only about 13% of people stream TV shows about once a month or less. So there's certainly a desire to have this entertainment experience at home. We're consuming Netflix. It's one of the biggest companies. There's an upcoming streaming wars with Disney getting into the streaming game. Amazon Prime still exists. Hulu still exists. Netflix is sort of the leader of the game. Disney's jumping in. DC Comics has their own streaming service now. Crunchyroll has their own streaming service, on and on and on. So streaming business is big. The actual going to see a movie in a movie theater is not as big. According to this poll, let's see, only about 14% of respondents saw movies several times per month or more. I am in the once a week, sometimes more than once a week, and I am in the 4% of respondents. So the problem is that the theater experience is dying. It's going away, and the subscription services that are currently trying to solve that problem are the AMC Stubs A-List, which allows people to see 3 movies per week for $20. Cinemark Movie Club, which offers discounts on concessions, but it's 1 movie per month at $9.99. And Cinema, it's spelled SINEMIA. That's getting some play in Europe, but that is also not a movie pass kind of thing where you can see 1 movie every day. That also has a limit on the number of features that you can see per month. So while I think you're right that if someone can crack it, it's a $1 billion idea, possibly, but some of this data is flying in the face of that. Maybe it's not a $1 billion idea. Maybe people just don't want to go to the theaters anymore, and that kind of spells bad news for this system, or spells this bad news for this industry as a whole. I'm a little nervous about some of the results of this incredibly interesting poll that Hollywood Reporter and Morning Consult had to offer. Wanna?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I mean, I I love movies. I really do, and I understand that it's a business, and there has to be a lot of money behind them, and there's an industry, and professionals need to work in that industry to manage and organize it. I'm a realist about all of that. At the same time, it's hard for me to feel too broken up about industry shakeups. I mean, I don't mean to sound like a Silicon Valley brat, which actually, and it did grow up in Silicon Valley, but the idea of disrupting this industry seems to me to be something that I'm going to invite. Again, I could regret that. Maybe the whatever comes next, even if it is just sort of a streaming dominated home service or something like that, something will be. I will miss going to the theaters if they do disappear entirely. But vinyl stuck around, so I really don't think that movie theaters are going anywhere anytime soon. Uh, some
Can you
people,
repeat what you just said? I got you skipped on my there was sort of a internet.
yeah,
Just
no,
repeat
I was saying that I doubt that movie theaters are going anywhere anytime soon. People still hold on to vinyls. They still like vinyl records. There's always going to be people who want to go see films in an actual theater, even if they're not quite as numerous or not quite as popular as they are now, perhaps. So yeah, I don't feel too bad about the industry as such. You know, again, maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong, but I am hoping that some it opens up avenues for creative endeavors, both of the film variety and of the business model variety, that will bring us new and exciting things that we can only sort of imagine now.
That may be true, and but I mean, I am the so, I mean, the headline from Hollywood Reporter is moviegoers aren't sold on subscription services yet, and what and that's fine. Like, I'm okay that they don't want to, have a movie ticket subscription service. What more troubles me is the fact that the average person, in another study that I heard, but I can't source right now, said that the average American only goes to the movie about 4 times per year, 4 or 5 times per year. Um, the goal of these movie subscription services is to rope in the casual moviegoer, to rope in as many people as possible. That was MoviePass's bet. Their hope was that they could get, as many people as possible in the world to sign up for their MoviePass and then forget about it as though it was a gym membership. That's what they were banking on, and that idea failed. What ended up happening is I went to the movies for free a lot during the summer, and I enjoyed every second of it. So when MoviePass dies, I'm sorry, it was my fault. Me and I think Dan Murrell of Screen Junkies also claims credit. So yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that the you I'm not I, like you, am not too sad about billionaires not being billionaires anymore. What I'm sad about is how it's possible that this industry is going through some radical change that lower level employees might feel the brunt of. Um, what is more, if everything goes streaming, and according to these poll results, it looks like people prefer to stream shit from their home rather than going to the theater. I understand why they do that. But if everything goes streaming and then everybody has a streaming service, then this is going to go right back to cable, because you pay your $10 for Amazon. You pay your $10 for Netflix. You pay your $10 for Disney streaming. You pay your $10 for DC streaming for some reason. And then you subscribe where no one has subscribed before. Yes, I'm stealing a joke from the Screen Junkies honest trailer of Star Trek Next Generation, to CBS All Access. And then that's $50 plus you're paying for internet access. And we're right back in the cable days again.
Yeah, or you could just start torrenting everything again, which is probably what I would find myself doing if if things got so fractured like that. What made Netflix awesome was precisely that it brought not everything, but a damn large volume of things that I wanted under one roof. I'm willing to pay for that. But if you start getting this territoriality going on, where we have to pay $50 for 5 different services, fuck that. No, I think a lot of people will probably pick their favorite service and then torrent everything else. And that all that money that Disney's trying to get, all that money that DC is trying to get, it's not going to materialize. I mean, some of it is, but it's not going to be what they're banking on. It's not going to be what they imagine.
Yeah, I mean, that torrenting, like, it makes me uncomfortable to talk on the internet about torrenting. I mean, let's say that that everybody definitely wanted to always play by the rules, and in that case, that sort of throws torrenting out of the window. But I think you're right that torrenting ends up becoming that's the disruptor that a lot of this is responding to. I think there are a lot of people who would prefer to torrent a film at home than go to the theater and watch it. That's a problem for the industry, because according to the industry, that's straight up theft. And you see all those anti-piracy commercials at the beginning of movies and DVDs and all of that, or Blu-rays. Yeah, so that's I don't know. I think this whole poll, there's 13 pages of it. I haven't even been able to digest all of it yet. It's a fascinating report from the Hollywood Reporter and Morning Consult, and I encourage everybody to go to THR and take a look at it for themselves. There's a lot of interesting things in here. I currently am an AMC stub subscriber, so I try and go to AMC as much as possible. It's near my work, but not near my home. So on the way home from work, I drop off at the movie theaters and see the week's releases as much as possible. So that ends up working for me while I live here in Evansville. Who knows when I move to another place, whether or not that will also be as convenient as it is now.
I'm sorely tempted to dig deeply into the philosophical presumptions and the moral dimensions of the claim that torrenting is theft, because there's so much about intellectual property rights and other sorts of things which I find fascinating and engaging and very much in my professional wheelhouse. But I think we've gone well over our allotted time for today, so maybe that will just have to be a conversation for another time.
Yeah, I am curious about your philosophies of torrenting and whatnot. Maybe that is a conversation for another time. Unfortunately, we will have to leave it here with my recommendation that everybody goes to THR and take a look at the raw data of this poll. It's really interesting, at least to me. And if you care about this industry, it might be interesting to you as well. Let's tease our next film. And next week on October 30th, well, first of all, we should probably talk about a really exciting time on Deadly Analysis, sort of our sister podcast. We're doing Halloween versus Halloween, the 1978 versus the 2018 version. So I have seen the Halloween film, and we'll talk all about that on Deadly Analysis. That's a podcast I'm really looking forward to. I know you are as well, Garrett. And next time on Jim and Garrett at the Movies on October 30th, the day before Halloween, we will be reviewing Jonah Hill's new film, Mid-90s, and we'll be pairing that with our movie club entry, Dazed and Confused. So if you want to go see Dazed and Confused between now and then, we will be talking full spoilers about Dazed and Confused, and we'll be doing our review of Mid-90s. Yes, you are right. We are well past our normal allotted time, although interesting stuff all around. Thanks again, Garrett. This is my name's Jim.
And I'm Garrett.
And this has been
Jim and Garrett
at the Movies. Good night.
Okay, yeah. No,
we screwed it up. All right, good night, everybody.